The battlefield stretched as far as his eyes could see. Flames rose from broken machines, and the smell of smoke filled the air. The earth shook again and again as alien weapons fired from above. Captain Reese stood in the middle of destruction, his breathing heavy but steady. In his hands, he carried the last symbol of hope for his people. An ancient helmet passed from one generation of warriors to another. The helmet was more than armor. It was legend. Stories said it had saved kings, soldiers, and rebels throughout human history. It could resist fire, survive explosions, and protect its wearer from death itself. Reese had worn it in countless battles, and each time he survived, he believed the stories a little more. But tonight, everything was different. His unit was gone, cut down by the alien swarm. Friends he had trained with, laughed with, eaten with, now silent bodies on the ground. The sky was full of enemy ships, red eyes glowing, hunting for the last survivors. He was alone, but he would not surrender. He pressed forward through the ruins of a burning transport, the sounds of gunfire echoing in the distance. That was when he saw her, a figure lying near the wreckage, her body half covered by broken steel. At first, Reese thought she was another fallen soldier, but when she moved, his breath caught in surprise. She was alien, her skin pale silver under the firelight, her hair like threads of light itself. But her eyes, strange, luminous eyes, were full of fear. Her armor was torn, smoke rising from it, and her voice came out weak, trembling. "Help me," she whispered. Reese froze. Every order he had ever received told him what to do. Leave her. Her kind were the invaders, the destroyers of Earth's colonies. They were the reason his brothers and sisters were dead. Yet as he looked at her, he saw not a monster, but someone broken, desperate, afraid. She was wounded, helpless, and reaching for him. The human heart is strange. Even in war, mercy speaks louder than hatred. Reese cursed under his breath, then pushed the wreckage aside and pulled her free. Her body was light, fragile compared to the heavy armor he carried. He lifted her into his arms, and for a moment he forgot she was the enemy. But the enemy scouts did not forget. Shadows moved across the smoke, red laser sights cutting through the darkness. They had seen him, and they had seen what he carried. Blaster fire ripped through the ground beside him, sparks and dirt flying high. He ran, clutching her close, but he knew he could not outrun them for long. He looked at the helmet in his hands, the one thing that had saved his life countless times. Without it, he would die. But with it, she might live. It was madness to even think about it. Yet in that moment, Reese made his choice. He pulled the helmet from his head, the weight of history heavy in his hands. The golden surface glowed faintly, as if the helmet itself knew what was about to happen. He placed it gently over her head. "Live," he whispered, "even if I don't." The shield activated, wrapping her in a sphere of shimmering light. Alien blasts struck again, but the energy field absorbed them, protecting her. Without the helmet, Reese felt the heat of battle burn against his bare skin. His armor cracked, his body shook with pain. Still, he pushed forward, carrying her into the ruins of an abandoned bunker. Inside, the noise of battle faded, though his body screamed with every step. He laid her down gently against the cold wall. His breath came in ragged gasps, his vision blurring. The legendary helmet still glowed on her head, its shield strong and unbroken. Reese collapsed beside her, blood dripping from his wounds. For a moment, silence filled the bunker. Then she moved, her glowing eyes staring at him with strange intensity. Her hands trembled as they touched his face, not with gratitude, but with something sharper, something colder. Reese forced a weak smile, thinking he had saved a life. But her lips curved into a different smile, one that made his blood run cold. "You fool," she whispered, her voice suddenly steady, almost cruel. "You just given your enemy the one thing that made you strong." Her words cut deeper than the wounds on his body. The helmet, the legacy, the shield, it was no longer his. And as the bunker shook with the sound of enemy footsteps drawing near, Reese realized the terrible truth. He had sacrificed everything, not for a friend, not for an ally, but for the enemy who would now rise with the power of his people's greatest treasure. The bunker walls groaned as distant explosions shook the ground. Dust rained down from the cracked ceiling, and every sound reminded Reese that the enemy scouts were still searching. He pressed one hand to his side, feeling the blood soaking through his armor, but he did not collapse. A soldier never falls until the fight is over. At least, that is what he told himself. The alien woman sat across from him, the legendary helmet still glowing faintly on her head. Her silver hair glimmered in the dim light, her strange eyes watching him closely, not with the gratitude of someone saved, but with the curiosity of a hunter studying prey. Her lips curled into a half-smile as she tilted her head. "Why?" she asked softly, her voice calm, almost mocking. "Why would you give up your power for me?" Reese coughed, his chest tight, his voice weak but steady. "Because you were dying," he said, "and I could not watch someone die like that." Her smile widened, sharp as a blade. "You humans," she whispered, "always so quick to trade your life for an illusion of mercy." He wanted to argue, but his strength was fading. Instead, he leaned back against the wall, his eyes narrowing. "You're alive because of me," he said. "Enemy or not, you owe me that." For the first time, her smile faded, replaced by something colder. She leaned closer, her glowing eyes fixed on him. "You don't understand, do you?" she said. "I am not a helpless victim, Captain. I am Lasura, commander of the Valerie Vanguard, and your helmet is now mine." The words struck him like another wound. Lasara. The name was known even among human forces. She was feared, whispered about in every campfire tale of war, the alien strategist who had broken colonies and shattered fleets. And now she wore the very thing that had protected humanity's bravest soldier. Reese's hand twitched toward his sidearm, but the weight of exhaustion held him down. Lasara noticed, and instead of fear, she laughed, a low, dangerous sound. "You saved your greatest enemy," she said. "You gave her your shield, and soon your people will curse your name for it." But then, something flickered across her face, a shadow of doubt. Her hand touched the helmet lightly, as if she could feel the memory of his sacrifice still lingering inside it. Her voice softened for a moment. "Why would you do it? Even knowing who I am, why would you still save me?" Reese's gaze met hers, steady even through his pain. "Because I am human," he said, "and we're not like you. We don't measure worth by sides. We fight, we suffer, but we still choose to save, even if it means saving the enemy." His words echoed in the bunker, carried by the silence that followed. For the first time, Lasara looked away, her eyes darkening as if she fought some unseen battle inside herself. She had been taught that humans were weak, foolish creatures who clung to emotions instead of power. Yet here she was, alive because of one man's choice, and she could not deny the truth of it. Outside, the sound of heavy footsteps grew louder. The scouts had found the bunker, their harsh voices echoing through the ruined corridors. Reese tried to stand, but his body betrayed him, his strength nearly gone. Lasara looked at him, then at the entrance, torn between two paths, deliver him to her army as a prize, or protect the man who had saved her. The door burst open, beams of light cutting into the darkness. 3 alien scouts entered, their weapons aimed, their armor gleaming with the red symbols of the Valerie. They froze when they saw her, Lasara alive, wearing the human's legendary helmet. "My commander," one of them said, bowing his head, "we thought you were lost." Lasara stood slowly, her presence filling the bunker like fire. But when her eyes flicked back to Reese, lying broken on the ground, something inside her shifted. Her soldiers expected her to kill him or hand him over. Instead, she raised her hand sharply, her voice cold and commanding. "Leave us," she ordered. "I will deal with him myself." The scouts hesitated, confused by her tone, but they obeyed, retreating back into the night. When they were gone, silence returned to the bunker, broken only by Reese's ragged breathing. Lysara approached him again, crouching down so her glowing eyes met his once more. "You don't know what you've done," she whispered, "but maybe you've done more than even you realize." For the first time since he placed the helmet on her head, Reese saw something different in her gaze. Not just cruelty, not just power, but conflict. And in that moment, he understood that the war was no longer just between two armies. It was between two choices: her duty as commander and the strange spark of humanity his sacrifice had ignited in her heart. The ground rumbled again, and the bunker shook with the weight of another bombardment. Reese's eyes closed, his body giving in to exhaustion at last, as darkness pulled him under. The last thing he saw was Lysara standing over him, her hand still resting on the helmet, her expression unreadable. Was she his savior now, or his executioner? The night stretched long inside the bunker. Outside, the sky burned red as enemy ships passed overhead, their engines screaming across the wasteland. Reese drifted in and out of consciousness, every breath heavy, his wounds deep. But whenever his eyes opened, he saw her, sitting only a few steps away, the helmet still glowing faintly on her head. Lysara had not left. She could have killed him, she could have called her soldiers back, but she had done neither. Instead, she watched him with a silence that was heavier than any blade. For a commander of the Valerie, mercy was weakness. Yet here she was, hesitating in a way she never had before. Her thoughts twisted against each other. This man had given her the helmet, an artifact her people had hunted for generations. Yet he had given it not in surrender, but in sacrifice. Why would an enemy lay down his greatest protection for her, the one who had brought ruin to his kind? The question cut deeper than any human weapon. Reese stirred, his cracked voice breaking the silence. "You still here?" he whispered, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Lysara tilted her head, her silver hair falling over her shoulder. "Do you expect me to leave?" she asked, her tone sharp. "I expected you to finish me," he murmured. "It would be easier." Her eyes narrowed, glowing in the dim light. "Perhaps," she said, "but easy choices are for those without power." Reese chuckled weakly, the sound rough. Funny, humans say the opposite. For a moment, her lips tightened, as if his words had struck something hidden. She looked away, rising to her feet, pacing the length of the bunker. "You don't understand what you've done," she said, her voice low but fierce. "My soldiers will not question me forever. They will return, and they will not forgive what they saw." "Then why protect me at all?" Reese asked, his voice hoarse but steady. "You gave them the order to leave." Lysara stopped, her fists clenched, her shoulders tense. She wanted to say it was strategy, that keeping him alive served her plans. But the truth pressed heavy against her chest, and she hated the weakness of it. Finally, she turned back to him, her expression unreadable. "Because part of me wants to know why," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "Why would you throw away everything for me, your enemy?" Reese's gaze was firm, even as his body trembled with exhaustion. "Because sometimes, even in war, we choose hope," he whispered, "and maybe, just maybe, I hope you could be more than what they say you are." His words lingered in the air like a wound she could not close. Lysara clenched her jaw, torn between anger and something she refused to name. The helmet pulsed faintly on her head, as if alive, as if it remembered the countless human hands that had carried it through centuries of battle. Now it rested with her, an alien commander, and it felt wrong, yet strangely right. The ground trembled again, heavier this time. A deep roar filled the air, followed by the grinding sound of machinery. Lysara froze, her warrior's instinct ignited. "That is not my soldiers," she hissed, her eyes narrowing. Reese forced himself upright, pain shooting through him. "Then what is it?" The answer came quickly. Shadows crawled across the walls of the bunker as massive shapes moved outside. Not Valerie scouts, but something older, something worse. The Earth battlefield was not abandoned after all. Stray war machines, once human, now corrupted by alien technology, dragged themselves through the ruins. Half machine, half monster, their glowing eyes searching for anything alive. Lysara's blade was in her hand in an instant, its edges glowing with alien energy. She stepped toward the entrance, her movements sharp, deadly. Behind her, Reese struggled to lift his weapon, though his body screamed against it. "You cannot fight in your condition," she snapped. "Stay down, or you'll die." "Better to die fighting," Reese growled, forcing himself to his knees, his rifle shaking in his grip. For the first time, Lysara felt a strange spark of admiration. This man should have been broken, but he refused to bend. Perhaps that was why humans were so dangerous, not their weapons, not their numbers, but their will. The corrupted machines burst through the entrance, their claws scraping stone, their metal jaws snapping. The bunker filled with chaos once again, fire and light flashing in every direction. Lysara fought like lightning, her blade cutting through steel and wires. But the swarm kept coming, their hunger endless. Reese fired shot after shot, each blast tearing into the machines, his arms shaking, his wounds reopening. Together, they fought back to back, a human soldier and an alien commander, enemies bound by survival. For every machine that fell, two more pushed through the smoke. Blood, sparks, and fire painted the bunker walls. Finally, as another machine lunged toward Reese, its claws raised to strike, Lysara turned, the helmet glowing brighter than before. She threw herself between him and the monster, the shield expanding outward in a blinding flash. The machine's claws shattered against the energy field, and the creature fell, torn apart by its own weight. When the smoke cleared, the floor was littered with twisted metal. The bunker stood silent again, only the sound of their ragged breathing remaining. Reese leaned heavily against the wall, his rifle slipping from his hands. Lysara stood above him, her chest rising and falling, the helmet still glowing with its borrowed light. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Reese looked up at her with a faint smile, his voice barely a whisper. "Guess you didn't let me die after all." Lysara's gaze softened, only for an instant, before she turned away, her voice cold again. "Do not mistake this for loyalty, human. We fought because survival demanded it, nothing more." But as she touched the helmet once more, she could not deny what she felt. A crack in her certainty, a shadow of trust forming where none should exist. The dawn came slowly, the first light of a broken sun spilling across the ruins. Inside the bunker, silence stretched heavy, broken only by the distant rumble of war machines patrolling the wasteland. Reese stirred awake, his body aching, every movement a reminder of the night's battle. He turned his head and saw her, Lysara, standing near the entrance, her blade drawn, the legendary helmet still resting on her head, glowing faintly as if it refused to fade. For a moment, he watched her. She looked almost human in the pale light, her silver hair tangled from battle, her shoulders tense as though carrying a weight heavier than armor. But her eyes, when she glanced back at him, were the same, sharp, unyielding, glowing with a fire that marked her as something other. "You should not be awake," she said, her voice calm but cold. "Your wounds need rest." Reese shifted against the wall, suppressing a groan. "Rest isn't an option in war," he muttered, his voice rough. "You should know that." Lysara studied him for a long moment, then turned away, as if his words had touched something she didn't want to face. Outside, the world shook with another bombardment. The war was spreading, reaching farther, drawing closer. Reese knew his people would be searching for survivors, and he also knew the Valerie would be hunting for Lysara. Their time hidden in the bunker was running out. At last, he asked the question burning in his chest. "What will you do with me?" Her body stilled, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she slowly lowered her blade, then looked back at him, her expression unreadable. "I should kill you," she said, her tone flat. A commander cannot be seen sparing the enemy. It is betrayal. Reese gave a faint smile despite the pain in his body. And yet I'm still breathing, he said. Her lips pressed tight, the smallest flicker of frustration showing in her eyes. You make everything complicated, she hissed. He laughed softly, though the sound ended in a cough. Humans are good at that, he whispered. The silence that followed was thick, a silence filled not with hatred, but with the weight of choice. Lysara turned and walked toward him, kneeling so her face was close to his. You gave me this helmet, she said, her voice quieter now. Do you even understand what it means? This relic was hunted by my people for centuries, and you gave it away, to me, your enemy. Reese's gaze was steady, his voice calm, even through pain. I didn't give it to the enemy, he said. I gave it to someone who was dying. Her breath caught for just an instant, the words striking deeper than she wanted to admit. No one had ever spoken to her like that. Not her soldiers, not her leaders, not even her own kin. They saw her only as commander, weapon, strategist. But he saw her as something more, and that was dangerous. Before she could answer, the ground shook again, harder this time. The sound of engines roared closer, and this time it was no patrol. Both of them looked toward the entrance as shadows stretched across the dust. A column of Valerie soldiers approached, their banners snapping in the wind, their armor gleaming red in the rising sun. They had found her at last. Lysara's grip tightened on her blade. She knew what they expected. She would emerge from the bunker victorious, the legendary helmet on her head, the human prisoner at her feet. That was what a commander should deliver. But her heart twisted with the memory of his words, of his sacrifice, of his refusal to hate even when he should. Reese saw the conflict on her face, and he spoke, his voice low but strong. Whatever happens out there, remember this. You don't have to be only what they made you. Her jaw tightened, her eyes flashing. You don't know my world, she said sharply. There is no choice for me. There is only duty. Then break it, Reese said, his words fierce even through weakness. If humans can defy extinction, if we can fight with nothing left, then so can you. The words echoed between them, a challenge, a plea, and something more. Lysara turned toward the entrance, the sunlight catching the edge of the helmet as it pulsed brighter. Outside, her soldiers were waiting, chanting her name, ready to follow her into the next wave of destruction. But inside, a chain was breaking link by link. At last, she spoke, though her voice trembled with anger and something deeper. If I defy them, they will call me traitor. Reese's lips curved into a faint, weary smile. Then maybe for once, the enemy you feared most will not be the humans. The bunker shook again as the soldiers closed in. Lysara gripped her blade, her heart torn between command and conscience. And in that moment, she realized her war was no longer against humans alone. It was against herself, against the chains of duty that bound her tighter than steel. The sun rose higher, its weak light fighting to pierce the heavy smoke above the battlefield. Inside the bunker, Reese leaned against the wall, every breath painful, his body refusing to heal fast enough. He could hear the steady march of Valerie soldiers outside, their boots striking the earth like war drums, their voices chanting in unison. They were not here to rescue. They were here to claim. Lysara stood at the entrance, the legendary helmet glowing faintly on her head, her blade still dripping with the blood of corrupted machines. Her soldiers awaited her command, their discipline unshaken, their loyalty absolute. One order, and they would storm the bunker, kill the human, and raise her name even higher in Valerie history. That was what duty demanded. But duty and choice rarely walk the same path. Reese's words still burned in her mind, the memory of his sacrifice pressing against every breath she took. She should have despised him for giving her the helmet, for sparing her life when he should have ended it. Instead, she found herself unable to lift her blade against him. A soldier stepped forward outside, his voice booming. Commander Lysara, the prey is within. Deliver him to us, and let the stars see your triumph." The others roared in approval, their voices shaking the bunker walls. Reese's eyes met hers from across the shadows, his face pale, but his gaze steady. He knew the truth. This moment would decide everything. Lysara raised her hand slowly, and the soldiers outside fell silent. Every eye turned toward her, every breath waiting for her order. Inside, her heart thundered. Was she Lysara, the commander, or Lysara, the woman who had seen humanity in her enemy? She turned back to Reese, her expression hard, though her voice cracked with hidden conflict. "If I walk out there with you alive, they will call me traitor," she whispered. "My name will be erased, my soldiers will turn on me, and my people will hunt me until the stars burn out." Reese coughed, his lips curling into a faint smile despite his weakness. "Sounds like being human," he said softly. Her jaw tightened, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You think this is a joke?" she snapped. But her anger wasn't for him. It was for herself, for the war inside her that no weapon could win. The soldiers outside grew restless, their murmurs rising. One shouted again, "Commander, give us the human. End this war with his blood." The words echoed like chains snapping against her ears. Lysara looked at Reese, and for the first time, she saw not an enemy, not prey, but someone who had given her a choice she never thought she had. She stepped forward, lifting her blade, the soldiers outside, roaring in anticipation. Reese closed his eyes, his voice calm even as he waited for the strike. "Do what you must," he whispered. But when the blade came down, it did not strike him. Instead, Lysara turned, the weapon slashing through the entrance of the bunker, sparks flying as stone shattered. Her soldiers froze, their cheers turning to confusion. Lysara stepped out into the sunlight, the helmet blazing brighter than before. She raised her weapon high and spoke with the voice of a commander, but not the words they expected. "This human is mine," she declared, her tone sharp as steel. "He is not your prey. He is under my protection." The silence that followed was heavier than any battle cry. Her soldiers shifted uneasily, torn between loyalty and disbelief. One brave warrior stepped forward, his voice trembling with anger. "Commander, this is betrayal." Lysara's gaze burned into him, unflinching. "No," she said, her voice cutting the air, "this is choice." The helmet pulsed, its shield flaring outward for all to see. For the first time, her soldiers saw her not only as their commander, but as something else, someone willing to defy the very chains of their empire. But defiance has a price. The murmurs rose into shouts, soldiers clashing among themselves, loyalty breaking, divisions forming. Some fell to their knees, unwilling to oppose her. Others raised their weapons, ready to strike their own commander for her betrayal. The air thickened with the promise of blood. Reese staggered to the entrance, leaning heavily against the stone, his body broken, but his spirit burning brighter than ever. He saw her standing there, one woman against an army, her blade raised not for conquest, but for something far rarer, freedom. "You've started a fire you can't put out," he whispered, his voice barely carrying over the chaos. Lysara did not look back at him, but her words carried to his ears. "Then let it burn," she said. And with that, the first strike fell, soldiers turning against soldiers, the battlefield no longer human versus alien, but loyalty versus choice. The war outside had just changed, and inside the ruins, two enemies stood together on the edge of a new storm. The ruins shook with the clash of steel and the thunder of weapons. Lysara stood at the front of the bunker, her blade flashing like lightning, her soldiers divided before her. Some obeyed her command, lowering their weapons in loyalty to her name. But others saw only betrayal, and their fury blazed hotter than the sun. The once unified Valerie ranks broke into chaos. Brother fought brother, shouts of rage echoing through the smoke. Energy blasts carved through stone, flames spread across the rubble. And in the center of it all, Lysara stood firm, the legendary helmet glowing brighter with every strike that met her blade. Reese dragged himself forward, his body screaming in pain. Every step was agony, but he refused to remain in the shadows. He picked up a fallen rifle, leaning heavily on the wall as he raised it. Shots cracked through the air, cutting down the soldiers who charged toward Lysara's back. She glanced over her shoulder for only a second, her glowing eyes locking with his. An unspoken agreement passed between them. Two enemies, bound not by duty, but by survival, and perhaps by something greater. The battlefield became a storm of light and fire. Lysara moved with the precision of a commander, striking only when needed, defending not just herself but the man she should have killed. Her soldiers shouted her name, some in loyalty, some in hate. The helmet's shield shimmered, deflecting blow after blow, its ancient power carrying her further than she should have endured. But even relics have limits. The glow flickered, the barrier weakening with every clash. Reese saw it too, his heart pounding. "Lysara," he shouted, his voice hoarse. "You can't hold forever." Her answer came in the swing of her blade, sparks flying as she cleaved through another rebel soldier. "I will hold as long as I must," she snapped, her voice fierce. Yet she knew the truth. Her defiance was burning faster than her strength. For every soldier she struck down, another rose in anger. The empire she had once commanded would not forgive rebellion. And she had chosen rebellion the moment she spared the human. The roar of engines filled the sky above. Both raised their eyes to see a massive Valeri warship descending, its shadow drowning the battlefield. The ground shook as it landed, its doors opening to release an elite squad, armored in black, bearing the crimson insignia of the High Council itself. They had not come to save her. They had come to erase her. Reese's chest tightened, not just from his wounds, but from the sight. "Those aren't your soldiers," he rasped. "They're executioners." Lysara's jaw clenched, her eyes hard. "Yes," she said, her voice low, "and they will not stop until both of us are ash." The elites advanced in perfect formation, their weapons raised, their voices cold as they spoke as one. "Lysara, Commander no more. You are charged with betrayal to the Empire. The helmet will be returned, and your life will end." The soldiers who had remained loyal to her hesitated, their courage faltering in the face of the Council's will. Some lowered their weapons, bowing in fear. Others fled into the ruins, unwilling to stand against the might of their rulers. Lysara stood alone, the helmet burning on her head, her blade gripped tight. For the first time in her life, she faced not an enemy across the stars, but her own people. Reese stepped forward, staggering to her side, his rifle raised though his body shook with weakness. "You don't have to fight alone," he whispered. She turned her eyes to him, her voice sharp but softer than before. "You should run," she said. "If you stay, you die." Reese coughed, a faint smile breaking across his bloodied face. "Then I'll die standing, not crawling." The elites raised their weapons in unison, beams of red light cutting through the dust-filled air. Lysara lowered her stance, the helmet pulsing brighter, its ancient shield flaring one last time. Reese lifted his rifle, his fingers steady on the trigger, and for the first time, human and aliens stood not as enemies, but as something far more dangerous, partners. The first volley of fire came like a storm. The shield flared, cracking under the weight of the assault. Lysara gritted her teeth, her voice a growl. "They will break us. Then let's make them bleed first." Reese answered, his shots tearing through the formation. The air burned with energy, rubble shattering under the force of the battle. Every strike, every blast, pushed them closer to the edge. And yet, in the chaos, there was clarity. Lysara had chosen defiance, and Reese had chosen to stand with her. Whatever the cost, they would face it together. As the smoke thickened and the shield flickered toward its end, Reese turned his head just enough to see her face. Even through fire and death, her eyes glowed not with cruelty, but with something else, something he had never expected. In that instant, he understood. The war was no longer about helmets, relics, or empires. It was about the fragile spark between them, a spark no army could extinguish. The battlefield burned red beneath the shadow of the Council's warship. The air was filled with fire, dust, and the endless clash of energy blasts. Reese and Lysara stood together, their backs to the bunker wall, facing the unstoppable storm of the Council's elites. Every shot shook the earth. Every strike weakened the legendary helmet's shield. The relic's glow flickered like a dying star. For centuries, it had endured, protecting warriors across countless battles. But now, under the weight of the Empire's judgment, even its ancient strength was fading. Each pulse grew weaker, every spark dimmer, until cracks began to spread across its golden surface. Lysara felt it first, a sharp vibration through her skull. The helmet was breaking. She knew what that meant. The shield would not last long. And when it failed, there would be nothing left to protect them. Reese fired until the rifle clicked empty, then grabbed another weapon from the fallen. His body screamed in pain, but his eyes burned with the same fire that had carried him through every battle. He glanced at Lysara, her silver hair glowing under the light of the flames, her blade dripping with the blood of her own kind. "You can still run," he rasped. "Find another way, survive." Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. "I told you before, human, I do not run." The elites advanced again, their formation unbroken, their voices a single command. "Submit or perish," they thundered. Lysara raised her blade, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Neither," she hissed. The helmet flared one last time, its shield expanding outward in a brilliant wave. The blast threw back the first line of elites, but the strain cracked the relic further, sparks flying as its ancient core groaned. Reese saw it, and his chest tightened. The helmet would shatter soon, and when it did, it could take Lysara with it. He moved closer, his hand gripping her arm. "You've done enough," he whispered. "You don't have to carry this alone." But she shook her head, her jaw tight. "No, this is my rebellion, my choice if I fall. It must be by my will." The elites regrouped, their weapons raised for the final volley. Reese's heart pounded, his instincts screaming. He had already given the helmet away once, but now he saw another path, one last sacrifice. He leaned closer, his voice low, so only she could hear. "Then let me share the burden." Before she could stop him, Reese ripped the helmet from her head, ignoring the searing heat that burned into his hands. The relic's glow surged, its cracks spreading faster, but its shield wrapped around him, blazing brighter than before. Lysara's eyes widened in shock, her voice sharp with fury. "No, you'll die." Reese smiled faintly, blood trickling from his lips. "Humans die all the time," he whispered. "But if my death means you live, then maybe it wasn't for nothing." The elites unleashed their final storm, beams of red fire tearing through the bunker. The shield flared like a second sun, holding for one last impossible moment. Reese roared, his body breaking under the strain, but he did not let go. The helmet shattered in a thunderclap of light, shards flying like stars. The explosion consumed the battlefield, a wave of energy tearing through the ranks of the elites. When the light faded, silence fell. The ground was littered with scorched armor and broken weapons, the Council's squad annihilated. Smoke curled into the sky, rising like the breath of dying gods. Lysara staggered to her feet, her blade slipping from her hand. Her eyes searched desperately through the haze until she found him. Reese lay on the ground, his body burned, his breath shallow, the broken remains of the helmet scattered around him. She dropped to her knees beside him, her hands trembling as she lifted his head. "You fool," she whispered, her voice breaking for the first time. "Why would you do this for me?" His eyes opened weakly, a faint smile flickering across his face. "Because I saw more in you," he whispered, his voice barely carrying, "and maybe you'll see more in us." Her tears fell, silver drops glistening against his blood. In that moment, the commander of the Valerie was gone. replaced by a woman who held an enemy, as though he were her only ally. The battlefield was silent, the warship above retreating slowly, its mission failed. Her soldiers watched from afar, none daring to approach. They had seen something they could not understand. Mercy sacrificed defiance. And in their silence, a new fear was born. Not of Reese, not of humans, but of Lysura, the commander who had chosen differently. Reese's hand tightened weakly against hers, his voice fading. "Don't waste what we started." Then his eyes closed, his body going still. Lysara bowed her head, her chest heavy with grief and fire. For the first time, she understood the weight of his humanity. Not weakness, not foolishness, but strength beyond anything her empire had ever known. She rose slowly, lifting his rifle in her hands, her blade at her side. The war was not over, but the choice had been made. She would carry his sacrifice, his fire, his defiance. And one day, the stars would remember not the helmet, not the empire, but the human who gave everything to save the enemy who became something more.